she said it again in the hospital. She said, run to the hard, run to the hurt, because it's in the greatest hard that God's going to do the greatest work. Whew.
Welcome to the Run to the Hard podcast, where we're here to remind you that God doesn't promise us a life free from suffering, but he always brings healing and restoration on the other end. Our goal is to inspire you to face life's trials with courage and trust in God's plan. And oh yeah, run to the hard that God allows. So Curtis, I've got to ask you, and I think listeners who know both of us are probably dying to know this. If I would have told you 15 years ago that me, the same player of yours who had a bad attitude, didn't put in the extra work in the gym, probably broke the university all-time record for bench minutes, would become a close mentee of yours and start a podcast, what would you say?
We're not recorded yet.
We are. Yeah, man. Hey, I told you I was going to bring the heat right off the bat.
Would I say unlikely? Probably.
Right.
I'd be like, yeah, no, I don't see that happening. So when it did happen, shocked but not shocked. Like both. I was like, this is pretty cool. No, it's more than cool. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, man. Well,
shocked and not shocked.
Yes. Here's the interesting thing to me is, as we were getting ready to create this first episode, I'm thinking to myself, like, man, this whole story of the Run to the Hard podcast is about healing and restoration.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And how hard things that God throws our way turns into a story of healing and restoration. And I'll be honest with you, like, we haven't publicly talked about this.
Nope, we haven't.
But what's funny is, like, we did not see eye to eye when I was your player, right? Again, because as I look back now, I used to tell people all the time, yeah, I had this coach, he didn't like me. He didn't play me. It kind of ruined my college career. I had some injuries and whatnot. And the funny thing is, as I got older, I was like, you know what, Chris? Like, let's be real, dude. If you'd have been putting in the work out of the gym, just different skills that made you a better player, it wouldn't have mattered if this dude liked you or not. You would have got clock, right?
Yeah.
And so I look back and I'm like, you know what? That was one of the best lessons I ever learned personally, going through what I went through in college, because I played the victim the entire time. And now I look back and I'm like, dang.
You just literally made me remember that conversation.
That's so funny, man. That's so funny. Man, well, so the reason I bring that up is because a lot of times people start a podcast and they're like, well, how do the co-hosts know each other and stuff? And people honestly don't care, man.
Sure.
Like, honestly, they don't care. They're like, all right, what is this podcast about? And, what's in it for me? But again, I just felt it was so interesting to think about our relationship. And many of, teammates could listen to this and be like, what?
Yeah.
Curtis and Chris are like doing something together? What in the world? So I just found that super, super kind of cool.
No, it's awesome. Yeah. The first time somebody hears this, they're literally going to blow their mind. They're going to be like, what in the world happened? Yep. That's good.
Love it. Well, here's why I'm doing this, man, is because in my seeking you out and seeing like how much wisdom the Lord has given you just through your life experiences and stuff, at the end of the day, I have a lot of respect for you and the things you've been through and the way you've handled it and how you've looked to the Lord. And so
thank you. As
we get this podcast starting, man, when we met for the first time, you were just telling me your story. And something you mentioned was the origin of Run to the Hard. And I'd love for you to first just, give us the origin story of Run to the Hard, why that mantra is so important to you. And then obviously people put the pieces together. This podcast is called Run to the Hard and they'll know why.
Whew. Yeah, we might cry through some of this. This is going to be...
Yeah.
So we'll talk more about how I got to a relationship with my wife, Michal. I'm sure we'll dive into that. But I met this woman who embraced hard from the first day I ever met her. Just, she would pull stuff out of you. She would ask intriguing questions, deep questions, like core questions. I mean, this was a woman I was trying to impress, and I literally, this is terrible. I can't believe I'm going to admit this. I literally used the words in our first coffee date. I've got a pretty good resume. Like, I've done some stuff. I think you would like me. And it was I'm 50 years old, and that was my pickup line. It was
that's
awful.
good.
It was
Good,
terrible because she could care less. This was a woman who, she'd been married to a politician. She has met some of the most powerful people in America. Like, she's not impressed. She doesn't care. And I'll never forget, like 2 or 3 dates in, she was like, I don't care about that stuff. She said, who is Curtis Christopher? She said, I want to know people deeply. I want to know them to the core. Nobody had ever talked to me like that. Never. I'm 50 years old. Nobody has ever talked to me like that. And I was floored because I had to dig deep and say, who am I? Like, that's a great question. I literally had to put her on pause and say, I'm going to have to think on that. I'm going to have to work on that. She says, well, before we go any farther, I need to know who you are. Like, I want to know you to the core. That's the relationship. So for her, running to the heart was relational. It was, she wanted to know you to the core. And to know you to the core means you had to dig up some rough stuff. Everybody's got junk. Everybody. And so I remember, when we were kind of vetting each other, she would ask all these hard questions. Tell me about your dad. Well, I haven't had a dad since I was 5 years old, so there's not much to say. She said, well, that makes you who you are. I kind of want to know. Like, who is this guy and what makes you? Hard question. That's a hard question.
It is.
To dig stuff up that I hadn't maybe never talked about. Anything happened in your childhood I need to know about. What's it like being raised by a single mom? And I'm like, I don't know. I've kind of become who I am because of, what about your church? What about your youth group, your church? Like, she asked all these questions. And then, to go even farther, hey, I can't date you until, what sin is there in your life? What things in the past do I need to know about? Because, I got 5 kids. I mean, when I say deep, hard questions, she pulled it out. And then as I got to know her friends over the years, this was normal. This was who she was. She'd sit down for coffee with a friend and go deep and have a best friend relationship with somebody she met for the first time because she just went so deep. And so this word hard became a normal conversation piece from day one. She didn't let anybody off easy. So I would start with the word hard. Like, there were always hard questions, going deep, wanting to know anything and everything about you. And she did this with everybody. It wasn't just that. But then she also had a lot of empathy. So she never put her story first. She always got it out of you. And then she would dig in and begin telling her story. She had 5 kids. She actually delivered 6. She delivered a full-grown 9-month-old child, stillborn.
Oh, wow.
This would have been number 3, I think. And to have her tell that story, you want to talk about hard stuff. What do you do when somebody comes up to you and says, where's your baby? We've been so expecting. And she's like, I don't have a baby. And, she told me one story one time where a guy, friend of the family, came up in church and was like, where's your newborn baby? And she's like, I'm sorry, but he died.
Oh, man.
And it devastated the guy so much, he turned and walked away. He had no words. And Michael's telling me this. I was like, what? She's like, yeah, he didn't even know what to say. He literally just walked away.
But hang on a second. Here's what's funny about that is so many people run from the hard.
Yes.
Right? So that's a hard conversation to have. That's a hard bit of information to get from her, right?
He had no words.
Yeah, and not know what to do with it. So what's so interesting with you even saying that right there is like, dude, that's part of the purpose of this podcast, right?
Right.
Is people are sprinting away from the hard. And Michael's story and the mantra that you both live by in your marriage, and we're going to get into all of the hard things that you guys have been through, but you're telling me she and you run to the hard. You run to the hard.
I'm learning.
Well, so give yourself a little credit here, man, because we've had some extensive conversations on your story.
Sure.
And that's part of the reason we're starting this podcast, because I'm like, dude, you got to get this stuff out, okay? God's really allowed some hard stuff in your life. Take me back to even you growing up, man.
Yeah, so these are stories that, I haven't shared with very few people, but yet Michael was the one who would dig in deep. And so raised by a Christian mom, my dad was Vietnam vet, got into drugs, got into affairs, got into everything. And so by the time I'm 5 and 6 years old, their marriage is pretty much over, And so, and there's anybody who's gone through divorce, whether kids or parents or whatnot, there's terrible stories. And I don't need to go into the details, but there was a lot of rough stuff. And to even go back and remember and think about some of the stuff that I saw or was exposed to, I mean, yeah, it changes you. It creates in you anger and hatred and bitterness. And I don't think I even discovered that stuff till I was in my 30s when I realized, wow, this is why I think this way, or this is the way I behave this way, or this is why I have such a quick, hot temper. And then, I'm 50 years old and Michael's dragging it out of me even more. And so, my parents went through a pretty messy divorce as a kid. My mom never remarried. She was a Christian lady, got us into a good church, very conservative church, Christian school. That's a whole nother story,
right?
The whole holiness, conservative, how you work through that. And that's a whole nother thought process, but still good people that honestly stepped in and helped to raise a crazy young boy. And so, mom goes through a divorce. She never remarries. She raises us the best she can. And I realized later in life that, it definitely did things to me. It definitely created this person that you see before you, good or bad. Some good. In fact, a lot of good. Independence, hardworking, entrepreneur, a lot of things came out of that. Being exposed to a lot of good men, not just one dad. I mean, had so many amazing men step in and be different kind of father roles. Like, who gets that opportunity? So she definitely put me in the right environment in which I could thrive by having lots of mentors. And I've had a lot of good ones over my lifetime. So that's my beginning of hard.
Sure.
Was that, I am one of those kids. I'm a statistic, grew up in a divorced home. I hate that stat. In fact, I hated it. And so then I get married. Then I start a family. Mm-hmm. And, I try to explain to my wife at the time, we're never going to get a divorce. I'm not going to be another stat. I'm not going to be somebody that they get to put on the wall as another statistic of, there's another, we have the whole generational curse thing in the Bible, right?
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm not going to be a part of the generational curse. I'm not going to be another divorce family.
Now, were your grandparents also divorced and
no
through your lineage, or was it just your dad and your mom?
So I think one of my aunts on my mom's side got a divorce after my mom. So my mom was the first. Okay. So on her whole side of the family, she was the first. And so she felt like, a failure.
Yeah.
And so there was that piece. So no, we didn't have a lot of divorce and stuff in the family. So that was hard, I think, on her. Her and I have had different talks about, how she raised us and how she did this, and there was an awful lot of, I don't know, a lot of guilt. I married the wrong guy, but that's hard to say because then you have kids with that guy. And I've experienced that now since being divorced. Man, you can say a lot of things, but then you got to go back and be like, no, you can't do that. You can't redo. You don't get redos in that area.
Sure.
And so, man, I graduate from college. I'm married. I get, I start having kids and there were things in our marriage that right off the bat, weren't good. And you're like, we can survive this. We can keep going. The Lord's going to help us. And I'm a Christian school teacher. I'm a high school basketball coach. I'm a youth pastor. Like when I first graduated, I was in ministry, like head deep, all these things. Not a great husband. Didn't know what a good husband looked like. And so there was hard even early on. And then it got worse. It got harder. You throw kids into the mix. And, I would tell my wife at the time, I'd be like, listen, I really don't know what this looks like. I'm doing my best, but I don't know what a husband looks like. I don't know what a father looks like. I've seen it from afar. I can watch on the outside and look at a family and say, I think this is what this is supposed to, but I didn't know how to fight correctly. I just didn't know stuff.
Sure.
And so I'm never going to put all the blame on one side of a marriage. I realize there's a lot of things I just didn't know. And maybe people had tried to help me or show me. But anyways, so then 26 years later, after failure after failure after failure, the Lord releases me, and we're divorced. You know, the one thing that I swore I would never be. And now I'm wearing this huge chain and a banner across my chest that says divorced, and I am miserable, and I don't know what to do with it. It's awful. It's gut-wrenching. A lot of people say that divorce is a lot like death. You experience a death. You literally have a part of your being, your DNA, ripped to shreds and pulled apart, and you feel it. Nobody can explain that to you early on, but when you go through it, it is devastating. And so I'm divorced, and in this weird, strange, only God way, become friends with this woman who is also going through a terrible divorce. So our hard is met through divorce. She's going through a terrible divorce. I've been through a terrible divorce, and it has reshaped us, reformed us, devastated us. She's already lost a child. She's had to work through that. She had, some of the things in her home and family as a kid, we worked through some of that. But I'll never forget, before we were officially dating, we had 30 days of vetting, and I hope we get to talk about that, because it was literally some of the most hard, gut-wrenching work I've ever done in my life. And that says something, because I'm not afraid to do hard stuff. But this was gut-wrenching, because we went so deep right into our cores of who we were and why we were this way and where this came. But I never forget, talking through the loss of her child, one of the most traumatic things, to have to deliver a stillborn 9-month-old baby. And she took me through that process. And I didn't have words. But on the other side of going through that, what God did through her and for her, and the ministry she had, like, she would seek women out who would lose a baby. Like, she wouldn't run from it. She would run to it. And I watched her do it. I watched her run into people's lives who were going through a divorce, or there was abuse at home, or they had lost a child. Like, I watched her. She would just recklessly run. There's no other word for it. Like, everybody else is shying away, and she would just headlong into it, because she knew she'd been there. She said, I have something to say. And God did a work. She talked me through what God did with her. She was saved as a kid. She was a strong youth group leader. She worked with kids. When she had kids, she got involved in a great homeschool group, and she would lead those groups, and she would teach kids. So she's teaching her kids, other kids. Like, she's just all in all the time. But what God did for her by losing her child was, in my world, I'm from the holiness movement. We call it being, sanctified. We call it being, all in, where we come face to face, with God, and we give everything to Him and let Him use it for His honor and glory. That's what we call it in our world. But she had that moment where, okay, God, what are you going to do with this? What am I going to do with this? And her relationship grew. She talked me through it, just grew immensely after that happened, which also gave her the confidence to go help others.
Yeah, dude, that's so good. Here's what's interesting about this, and I'm not sure if you have or haven't put these pieces together, but, Michael goes through loss. She loses a child, a stillbirth, which is difficult. My wife and I have had the same experience, much, much younger than 9 months. But here's what's interesting is she runs after those women that went through the same pain. But I want to also point this back to you, okay? You grew up without a father. And many of the avenues that the Lord took you down were for guys without dads.
Yeah.
So give me an idea of where the Lord took you from no father, the things you obviously learned, and then where you would end up.
That's a good question. I had a lot of energy as a kid. Whew. And so probably would have been on meds at some point, but I'm glad nobody ever thought of that, or it wasn't really a thing back then.
Right.
But lots of energy. And so it took a lot of guys in my life to tame me, to help me, but also, found out I was good with my hands and could work on cars at a young age, could help mom around the house at a young age. And so that only comes by having good men in your life. So at some point as a young adult, I was like, okay, I have been blessed to have really good influences who have trained and helped me. And then when I got married, my father-in-law, actually, he became one of my closest friends. Divorces, that was miserable.
Yeah.
To lose your closest friend because of a divorce, that was awful. And that's a whole nother conversation.
Sure.
But that's one of the dilemmas of divorce, is that, it cuts families apart as well. But anyways, he became my dad, and he was super hands-on. He was good with his hands. He was always instilling wisdom of, this is the kind of husband you need. And this is a guy who got saved later in life. He didn't grow up in church.
Now, you're talking about someone when you were younger, or you're talking about your ex-wife's father?
My ex-wife's father.
Okay.
And so, I'm out of college. I'm starting a family. I'm married, and I'm recollecting all of these men who poured into me and who have honestly helped create this person that I'm becoming. Well, then you're thrown into this role because, anytime you volunteer for church work, you're just thrown in. And, I'm thrown into this role of being a youth minister and a high school teacher and a high school coach. And you're like, oh, crap, I have to be one of those guys now who is now mentoring and pouring into. And so I remember having to come to grips with that, but then also run to that. I don't want to say hard. I want to say unknown at that point.
Sure.
I don't have a clue what I'm doing, but I'm having to go back and dig deep as for all the men who poured into me and what that looked like and how that helped me and how I could pour into them. I'll never forget this. This literally just popped into my brain. It might have been when you were with the college, but when I was coaching at OCU at the college, one particular day in class, because I would always have this basketball class where I'd have all the guys come in and we'd share wisdom and I would share, all kinds of different stuff that I had discovered over the years. But I literally looked around the room and I said, okay, guys, hard question. I got to know, how many of you grew up without dads? And if my memory serves me correct, 17 out of 20 guys in a Christian college basketball program grew up without a dad.
Wow.
And I was just blown away.
Yeah.
And so that was one of those aha moments for me, like, oh, crap. Okay, Lord, what am I supposed to be doing? And so that's my version of running to a hard past, a hard childhood without a dad, is that was a defining moment in my life when I looked at a room full of guys and realized statistically, this is probably the norm across America.
Sure.
Like, oh man, have I got work to do.
So you grew up with no father.
Mm-hmm.
God places you in places like coaching and high school and all these places with these kids without fathers. I'm thinking that there's got to be somebody listening to this that's in one of two spots, right? It's either a single mother who has a son who does not have a father, okay? Or it is the actual son who really has never had a father figure. And they hear you gloss over, I found support. But walk me back to how you found support. I need something actionable for someone to listen to, because hearing that, that's amazing, right? But can easily hear that and be like, oh, shoot, I don't have support, right? So you did it, man. How?
Wow, this is a deep hole. Whew. You said it would be tough. Moms, single moms, they hold the key to all of this, because you can't help what's already happened in your life, whether it's a death or a divorce or whatever, or maybe you didn't plan on this child. Like, it's done. Can't go back. Can't fix that. But you still hold the key. Like, for my mom, she had to be obedient to the Lord, taking her to a place that We didn't know anybody. Okay, Lord. I mean, we were desperate. We were poor. She was pawning stuff off to buy groceries. It was bad. And I didn't know, you don't realize it till you get older, but it was bad. And the Lord, because of her faith, because of her prayer life, because of her commitment to the Lord, he brought us to a home, to a place, to a church who would love on us correctly. How many single moms, oh goodness, this is a hard spot. How many single moms turn to guys they should have no business turning to because they said the right thing, or they're so desperate for love, they're so desperate for, intimacy, and they make just another bad mistake and then another bad mistake, and the kids continue to suffer for it. And so moms hold the key for this. My mom, bless her heart, she was like, okay, I don't want to mess this up again. God, you got to do something. You've got to. I remember she told me one time, she said, I'm married to Jesus. I'm like, I get it. I'm young, probably a teenager when we're having this conversation. I'm like, I get it, but I don't want to say this out loud, but men and women have needs, and how's that working out for you? And I'm confused. And she's like, no, you don't understand. I said, I'm married to Jesus. She said, I had to beg the Lord to fulfill and fill all of my needs, complete me in him, so that I can be the best mom and caretaker for you guys, because I know that I will probably mess it up again. Wow. True statement.
Wow.
That really happened. And I've never forgot it. People would always ask, how come your mom never remarried? And it's, it's not like a 2-minute conversation. There's a lot going on there. So the moms hold the key. And I could tell you, oh my goodness, I could tell you a lot of stories about failures, successes in this area. But, everything that we're talking about all comes back to Michal. And this was an area in her life where I'll never forget the first coffee date. So she looks at me, first coffee date. We don't even know each other yet. And she says, so what do you want? I'm like, what do you mean? She goes, no, seriously. Do you want to hire me? Do you want to marry me? Do you want to date me? And I was just floored. Like, who are you? Who does that?
Straight to the point. No,
she was like,
no wasting time.
She was like, no. You don't understand. Like, this is first coffee date. Like, we don't know each other. And she says, here's what I know about myself. Because I think I said some flippant answer like, well, I really like to get to know you, like be your friend. And she said, no, that's not going to work. And I was like, what do you mean? She's like, I know myself too well. I can't just be a friend with a guy.
Yeah.
I was like, what? Like, again, who says that on a first coffee date? But this is a woman who has done the same inventory. She's like, listen, I got 5 kids. I'm going to remarry. Again, first date. I'm going to remarry. I want to find the right guy. And he's got to provide for me, for my kids. He's got to be the man that I need in my life. And I'm like, oh my word. True story. So here's a woman, which this is awesome because I think of my mom's story. And then I think of this lady who's like doing this inventory. Like, I can't mess this up again. We got to get this right. There's too much at stake.
Yeah.
There's too much at stake. That's the answer to your question. Sure. There's too much at stake.
Yeah.
Whew.
Man, that's so good. And imagine if Michal wasn't used to running to the heart and she sat with you and you guys literally wasted 3 or 4 hours just on the surface, man, right? Like, no, just on the surface.
Not her. She was not surface at all.
Yeah.
Whew. Wow.
Man, and what's so cool is, when I asked you to speak to that single mom, your answer was submission to Jesus.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And what's so interesting about our leadership is, as men who lead the household, it's our submission to Jesus, and it's Christ as the head, and then the wife in submission to the husband. But your mom literally submitted straight to the Lord and said, like, God, I don't have the leadership in my family that I need, right? So you have to be that leader for me. And hence her saying, I'm married to Jesus. I love the comparison of your mom and Michal. And obviously that's something you were so attracted to.
Sure.
Right? Because they shared somewhat of a similar story. So when it comes to the other side of the table, when we talk about, you told me you asked the question, hey, here's a hard question, guys, who grew up without a dad? I mean, you said almost 80% of these dudes raise their hands. So I have to think critical numbers here as people are listening to this podcast.
Right.
There's somebody listening who don't have a dad.
Yep.
Now give me his perspective. How does this guy who has never had a dad gain support from fatherly figures like you were able to do?
Wow. And that's a great question. So when you're young, when you're young, you just don't know. You don't know what you don't know. I was blessed to have some really godly Christian men from our church step in, which, Chris, we got to talk about that at some point.
Yeah.
Where are the men in church stepping in and helping with single moms and kids without dads? Like, I'm sorry, but we got to get serious about that again. Like, that was the norm in my church. I don't know why, but it was.
Yeah.
These men who would just help whoever. The helpfulness in our church was off the chart. So
did they seek you out, or did you seek them out, or was
as a kid they sought me out?
Man,
it was just meeting a need.
That's awesome.
Again, we were the poor kids, man, and they sought us out, met a need. I can't tell you how many times groceries showed up on our doorstep. I can't tell you how many times. Oh man, cash in a card. I mean, that was our norm growing up as a kid. People in our church just meeting our needs like constantly. And then the men showing up. And pastor, my pastor, he'd call and say, hey, my nickname growing up was Charlie. Hey, is Charlie available Saturday? I need some help over at the church. We're doing a demo job. 8, 9, 10-year-old Charlie could go work at the church for pastor. And he was a hard dude, but he was a good dude. And he would take me in and take me to construction sites and whatever. Again, back to that whole men need to be doing this because these kids don't know what to ask for themselves, and sometimes the moms have no clue what to ask, and the men of the church need to be doing this on the regular. Yeah. So this is a two-part question. Men need to step up and be this for somebody else. They need to, as a family, identify somebody in the church, a kid in the church, a boy in the church, and you know what? It's pretty easy to do. Look at their shoes. They need tennis shoes. They need a haircut. Just give the kid a job, pay him a few bucks, and something.
Yeah. Dude, that's a great challenge. Seriously, if you're listening to this and you're in the church, and whether you think you have the resources or not, right? Like God will provide.
Right. Absolutely.
Like yes, seek out a young kid who doesn't have a dad. Man, that's so good. So you mentioned you're a single dad, Whew. Right? We're about to get a little heavy because someone who doesn't know you from anybody and doesn't know me is going to understand real quick why Run to the Hard is hard and a lot of what God has brought you through and allowed this hard in your life is many of the things we're going to be covering on this podcast. But we've talked about you growing up without a father, right? We've talked about you getting married and going through divorce. And we talked about, you developing this relationship with this woman and then bringing 5 kids into the picture, which we didn't go all the way into,
sure.
But I want to keep going because you and Michael had a strong marriage. You're learning as much as you can about each other, and you're 2 years in, and walk me through what happens.
Whew. Yeah, so I'd love to talk about, even our dating process, 2 divorced people asking hard questions, working through that process.
Sure.
And then letting God lead. I'm sorry, but I'll be honest, and there'll be people that won't like this, but I tried to bail a couple times.
Yeah.
I'm like, this is too hard.
Sure.
And I would say, this is too hard. There's 5 kids. There's a lot of drama. There's, it was, and then the work to go through. A couple times I said, I don't think I can do this. And I even had friends saying, you don't have to do this. Like, you literally don't have to do this, Curtis. You could just have a simple, easy life by yourself, or just find an older woman that's got grown kids.
Comfort, man. Comfort. Live in the comfort.
I can't tell you. And my mom's going to hate this, but she even said it. She's like, you don't have to do this.
Sure.
And every time I would get to that point, God would like nudge me. I would feel his thumb in my back. He said, no. There's a plan here. Get back in line. It'll be okay. Like, every time.
And that plan was not what you thought it would be.
Oh, no. Whew.
My gosh, man. this is the hard, man. Like it's God continued to have you press into this marriage when it was hard. And you would have never imagined why.
Yeah, so we get married quickly. Once we realize, okay, that God's all over this. And I'd love to tell you some of the early stories of how we actually met each other. That was all God. I had nothing to do with that. But we go through this 30 days of vetting each other, 3 and 4 hours a night, every night, staying up late, turning over every single stone possible, asking every possible question, waking up the next day saying, okay, all right, that was hard, but we got to keep going. And then we get to the point where we're like, okay, because you don't do that. You don't do that unless you're going to get married. I mean, there's no, that's just what's going to happen. And we do it. We go through the vetting. We're like, okay, let's do this. Let's get married. And we had to get through a lot of layers, like an onion peel.
Sure.
And the kids were such a big part of her decision process to get married. And I'd like to talk about that someday. But
yeah, of course.
So we get married, and we start a business together. That was crazy. That's a whole nother story. And I hurt my back right off the bat. I've already had 2 back surgeries. This woman is amazing. We're having a blast. I hurt my back. I have to have another back surgery. So in the first year of marriage, we do 2 dumb things. We start a business, and it was a lot of work, but it was fun because we did it together. I hurt my back. I have another back surgery. That was hard because this poor woman now has a drugged up husband with back surgery, and she's like, "Who are you?"
She wants to hike, man.
She's like, "Who are you?" Like, I don't even know, because it messes with you. She's like,
Sure.
"I don't know you.
Sure.
You're not the guy I met." That was hard,
man,
to have her look you in the eye and say, "You're not the guy that I met. Like, when am I going to get that guy back?"
Man,
that was hard. And so I had to work myself back. And so we get into year 2 of marriage, and things are popping, man. I'm coaching one of the boys' basketball teams, and our business is going great. And we're best friends. I've never had anything like it. We share everything. We're raising kids together. My kids love her. She loves my kids. I'm learning after a hard divorce how to be the father of adult kids. So I'm learning how to be the father of 5 young kids, and still learning how to be the father of 2 adult kids, married kids. What does that look like? How does all this work? It's still messy, but it's working, and God's doing some neat things. And we go on our 2-year wedding anniversary in August, and I take her to Mackinac Island. We've never been there. She's never been there. I've been there. I wanted to share that with her. It was a neat experience, and we're walking, hiking, biking, and she keeps having these episodes. She's like, I'm way out of shape or something's wrong, because I cannot breathe. My chest hurts. I'm like, babe, something's not right. After a couple of days of that, I'm like, when we get home, you need to get checked out. She's like, yeah, I will. And so we get home. This is a great honeymoon, or a great anniversary. We have a great time. Great pictures. It was so good. And we did a lot of life planning. Like, this is going to be the most amazing year ever. Like, we have this time away, and we're planning the school year. She's going to homeschool a couple of the kids again. And we had a great plan. And we get home. She goes to the doctor. He's like, I don't know. He says, maybe you have some kind of virus in your lungs or something. I can't put my finger on it. But yeah, come back in a couple of weeks. Well, it just gets worse. Over a 2-3 week period, she has these episodes. She can't breathe. She can't catch her breath. And finally, one weekend in September, she swells up. She can't breathe. She's been up half the night. I take her to the emergency room, and man, it was awful, because I'll never forget, an older nurse came in, and she said, she looked me in the eyes. She didn't look at Michael. She looked me in the eyes. She said, if they don't come in here in the next 10 minutes and tell you what's wrong, you pack her up, go to Columbus.
Wow.
True story. She knew.
No way.
She was an older nurse. She knew what was going on.
Oh, wow.
10 minutes later, the doctor comes in and says, I'm sorry, Miss Michael, but you're in heart failure.
Oh, my God.
And we're like, what? What do you mean she's in heart failure? Like, you are, and we don't know why. And so we're going to take you up to the heart floor, and we're going to start testing and running through everything. And we're the word devastated isn't, we're confused. Like, Michal is 43 years old. She's 43 years old. And she's in heart failure. And this is a woman who hikes and bikes and plays soccer in the front yard with the kids. Like, there's no way. Like, this is not even a possibility. And so lots of confusion. I began. So Michal was the Facebook guru. That's a whole nother story of how we met and all that. But, so her world, her friendships, how she communicated was through Facebook. So I'll never forget the first post I did was like, hey, everybody, I don't know what's going on, but pray for us. But I just found out Michal's in heart failure, and people are like, what?
Shocking. Yeah.
And so, I would keep everybody up to date through Facebook, not as like this ploy for sympathy or something like that. It was just happened to be her world. This is how, if I was in trouble, this is what she would have done, because this would have been her world of people that she was used to and comfortable, telling people what was going on in our lives. And so, we're there overnight, do tons of testing. She's basically taking on fluid because her heart's not pumping the fluid out fast enough. And so they start giving her like diuretics and stuff like that. And they send us home for a couple of days. They're doing blood work. They're doing testing. Week goes by, and more testing, more testing. What is this? And what we didn't know was the doctor had found what I know of today, it's called amyloid. He found amyloid in her urine, but he wanted to confirm. And so he did another blood test to confirm it. And then he had already called the James Cancer Hospital before he even talked to us about it. Wow. He was on it. He was catching it. He was trying to, get things in place before we got the dreaded phone call. And yeah, I know right where the spot was. It was in Canal, Winchester. We were driving home from another doctor's appointment, getting more blood work, and he called, and he asked, "Are you driving?" Yes. He said, "Why don't you pull over? I want to talk to you." And we knew that was bad.
Yeah.
He proceeded to tell Michal that she has bone marrow cancer, and then she has a protein called amyloid. And the bone marrow cancer is literally creating this rogue protein that is attacking all of her organs. And her heart obviously has it. Her heart's shutting down. It's not pumping the fluid out. Then it'll move to whatever organs are next. And, what do you do? We're sitting on the side of the road, and, both Michal and I are pretty straightforward, straight shooting people. And I'm having to take a new role. Like, I know in this moment I have to take over. Like, I have to take over decisions. I have to take over questions. I have to take over answers. And in front of her, I didn't hesitate. I said, "Doc," he's a young guy too. Nice. He's a great guy. I said, "Doc," I said, "we got 5 kids at home. We're realists. You can't sugarcoat this." I said, "Whatever doctor hat you got on right now," I said, "please take it off." I said, "If this is your family, your wife, you literally have to tell me what to do. We don't know what to do." And he took his hat off. His doctor had all of the niceties and everything's going to be okay. And he said, "You need to go home and get your house in order." And I said, "Today or tomorrow?" He said, "Tonight." Just that plainly. He said, "Go home right now and get your house in order." And we sat in the van and cried on the side of the road, prayed together. Went home and got all the kids around and had to tell them. It was awful. Yeah, that was awful. We all hugged and cried, and of course they had so many questions, and we didn't have the answers. I remember calling my kids, saying, "Hey, on Friday we're going to do family pictures," and I'm like, "You got to be here," and I didn't have to say anything else. They knew.
Wow.
All the kids were there. We took family pictures. In fact, upstairs you'll see the family pictures that we took hanging on the wall. The kids had signed up to be baptized that next week at church.
Wow.
And so we did it. We had a baptism. Another week goes by, and it's going to be our first cancer treatment. So we'd already been to the James. We've talked to our doctor. He's one of the top 2 amyloid specialists in America, right here in Columbus, Ohio. And we had to have that chat with him and say, "Be real to us. Don't sugarcoat this." And he's like, "Yeah, it's not got a good survival rate." I said, "Do you have any?" He's like, "I have one." He had one.
Wow. Jeez.
He has one.
Jeez.
I was like, oh, I mean, just hard conversation after hard conversation.
Sure.
And so that next weekend, the kids get baptized. And then there's one more week before we go in for our very first treatment on a Monday. And so we get all of her family together at the house. And if you look at, she's already starting to turn color. Her kidneys are starting to fail. They're not getting the fluid out. And we do family pictures with her whole family, 10 kids, all the cousins, everybody in our front yard, in the backyard. They're all here. And then Monday, she goes in for her first treatment and she never comes home. That was the beginning of our 10 days in ICU. And so nobody knew. We didn't know weeks, we didn't know months. But from the time we got the actual diagnosis until the time she died was 4 weeks. So we had 4 weeks. But once we went in for the first treatment, we had 10 days. And it just, the wheels fell off and her organs started shutting down. And we had to put her on basically machines, dialysis, and a machine to help her heart. And obviously that's a huge part of our story. But anyways,
Yeah.
We were married for 2 years. Things were moving. I mean, we were on top of the world. We loved each other. She was my best friend. Man, there was so much good.
Man, I know it's so difficult to relive all that, man. And just raw emotion, and it's so hard to go through. I mean, I see it, I feel it as a friend, and the whole purpose of this podcast, right, is run to the hard, and that's hard. What's so incredible about this story, and I'm gonna walk us back to when you're telling me, like, this is hard. I don't know that I'm going to do this, right? And in your words, like, God's putting his thumb in your back, like, push, man, push. And you lose your wife to cancer. But how has God revealed the whole reason that all this came together in the first place, and the hard that he has allowed and is continuing to push you to run towards?
Well, he's still revealing. There's some low-hanging fruit that I can grab pretty easy.
Yeah.
But even this weekend, he's still revealing the whys. Man, in the hospital, she was just horrified about what would happen with her children. She talked about it every day. What's going to happen with my kids? And I would just promise her, I said, God's got this. God's got this. God's got this. We have to trust him. And, she would just profusely thank me. She's like, I can't believe I got to have you to be by my side through this.
Mm.
And, she'd be tempted to say, what if? And I'd say, don't do that, babe. That's not, yeah, God's got this. He's brought us this far. Like, there's no what ifs. We're here. We're doing this. You know, Ella, her oldest, we've talked about this a few times, you know, what if you'd never met mom? And what if, you know, we were, anyways. And I'm like, we can't go there. Like, nope. God had all this in mind when he put us all together. And side note, I never talked to Michael's ex-husband, not one time. I tried, you know, I was trying to do all the right things to be not only a good stepdad, good husband. I was trying to, you know, make the connections to make this, I say easy, but nothing's easy in a divorce, you know.
Right.
Never talked to him until the actual funeral. And Lord opened up a couple really neat opportunities to just invite him into the circle. And, you know, I remember after the funeral and we went to the dinner afterwards, I just walked up to him not knowing that I would ever see the children again.
Man.
Yeah, think about that.
Insane.
I literally was like, okay, God's got us this far. Like, I have to trust him. Like, I don't know if I'm ever going to see these children again. There was no reason I had to. I mean, I'm not a legal guardian. I'm their stepdad. They've got a dad.
Yeah.
And I walked up, stuck my hand in front to shake his hand and said, sir, I'm here for whatever you need. Please just know that. And then walked away, just, you know, having buried my wife, but then also felt like I was burying this. Yeah.
Man.
And it took some time. Lord was working on him, was working on me. And man, some really great conversations, especially this last summer. But just so, if you know our story and you've followed us at all, just know that, man, I've got, you know, 5 kids, 3 and 4 days every week. And Dad and I get along. We talk all the time. And we literally have the kids' best interests in mind. And we're 2 dudes parenting 5 kids. It's the weirdest thing ever.
It's incredible, man.
It's like it's the weirdest thing ever, but only God.
Yeah.
Yeah, only God could do that. And you know, it's 5. It's not it's not a walk in the park, it's a lot.
No,
I'm an Uber driver without the pay. I mean, that's the best way to describe, you know, man. trying to keep up with 5 kids, but
yeah.
You know, so that's man. Only God knew that. Only God knew that. And then just like Michael was so willing to help others, man, I've already lost, I think 5 people my age or younger to cancer in the last year and a half. That's crazy.
That's insane.
You know, I've written our story, you know, a lot. I've written our story and posted from day one, from the first day I asked for help to pray for, because we were learning this stuff to the present day. You know, I've become the storyteller, not just for Michael, but for all of the new widows and widowers that I'm now friends with. What a weird club to be a part of. You know,
yeah.
I hated being part of the divorce club. That was awful. But, you know, at some point you embrace it. I didn't learn to embrace it. Michael helped me learn to embrace. Part of running to the heart is embracing the circumstance that you're in. She embraced losing a child, how she could help people. She had to embrace being divorced. She hated being divorced. We both did. Divorce was not part of our vocabulary. It wasn't something we wanted. She didn't want to be divorced. Neither one of us wanted to be divorced, okay? But she embraced it. And oh man, I'll say this. It's okay. She would make me pray for our exes.
Wow, man. Gosh.
We'd have prayer time at night. She's like, okay. I'm like, I don't want to. She's like, we need to.
Oh, dude, that's so powerful.
I'm like, phew. So when I say,
that's so powerful.
When I say recklessly run to hard stuff, she not only could do it in her own life, but she did it with her kids. She would, man, when we found out she was possibly going to die from this stuff, like, she just poured into those kids. You know, she would say things like, don't be mad at God. Don't be mad at God. Run to this. Dive in, cry, bawl your eyes out, scream, do whatever you got to do. But she would tell both the kids and I, like, you guys, don't you dare, like, abandon God or blame God for this, or or become bitter over this. And that's where the run to the hard came from. She told the kids and I, oh man, over these last few weeks, she literally would say, run to the hard, run to the hurt, run to the hard. And then one time, and it stuck with me, I never forgot it because I wrote about it. She said it again in the hospital. She said, run to the hard, run to the hurt, because it's in the greatest hard that God's going to do the greatest work. Whew.
Wow. Man, that's so true.
And I mean, you want to talk about a powerful moment.
Yeah.
Like, whew.
Yeah.
So it doesn't come easy for me. And I don't think it came easy for her, but it's something that she embraced. I'm not going to run from this because God is so much bigger than this. And, so the kids are part of this puzzle, but then I get to minister to so many new again, I talked about the divorce club, hate being in that club. Well, now I'm in this widower club.
Yeah.
I mean, who wants that? But trying to embrace it, trying to reach out, trying to help others, trying to just check in, and when you're going through this, I'm not even a year and a half, and I'm still numb. I'm not on the other side of this. I'm still working through daily, just getting out of bed, going to the office, doing basic chores, so I'm far from out of the woods.
Sure.
But having somebody who had such high expectations of what we should be doing, who we should be helping, has become my new goal because it's what she would be doing. Literally, that's what I had a friend ask me a few months ago. I was struggling. And he's a friend that had helped me even through divorce, would always check on me, would always call me, would take me to lunch. And he grabbed me for lunch. It's probably been closer to 6 months ago. He's like, dude, he says, I know you're dying, you're hurting. He said, but if the roles were reversed, he said, what would Michael be doing right now?
Oh, what a great question.
Whew.
Wow. What a great question.
I laughed because I was like, oh my word, she'd be ridiculous. She would be just running straight into this headlong for everybody.
She'd be doing exactly what you're doing, man. She would. There's so much raw emotion in this episode, and we've kind of shared with the audience here, like the hard that you've been through, and how Michal has been, a massive piece of the puzzle here in terms of like how you're moving forward, because she taught you a lot, right? And taught a lot of people,
yes,
a lot of things. But there's a harsh reality that she's no longer here. You have a journey, man, ahead of you, and as we end this episode, I have to ask you, like, where do you go from here, man? I mean, where's your hope? What do you do next?
I wish I had more answers, but I have more questions than I have answers. But my hope is still in God. When Michal went through some of her hardest things, she would say, man, I just have to dive deeper into the Word. And she loved music. Man, she would play worship music constantly. It was just part of her everyday life. Every morning, and she was constantly playing her worship list while taking a shower. And oh man, though you slay me,
Shane, man.
every morning. You want to talk about a tearjerker?
Wow.
Every morning, but because of what she had experienced in her life, she was. It's weird to say, she was preparing to run to the hard every day. That was part of her morning journey. And she'd stand in front of the mirror sobbing. I'd walk in, especially if I was, going into work a little bit later, and she'd get up and she'd get her get a shower, I would walk in and see my wife sobbing in worship in front of the mirror getting ready.
Man.
I was like, whew. It's like she was preparing every day for it.
Wow.
That's a hard act to follow. Whew. But it motivates me knowing that it's possible. So many scriptures and stories and disciples, what they went through for the cause of Christ. So we have a hope in heaven. And man, I can't wait to talk about that. Whew.
Amen.
Can't wait to talk about that. But we have a hope in heaven. And while we're here, I'm motivated to share Christ with these kids. I'm motivated to share their mother with these kids. I'm motivated to take everything I've learned from this journey and try to apply it to not only my own life, but, the friends who will let me. And I don't have the answers. I just know who does.
Amen. Amen, dude.
And I have to hang my hat on that every day.
Yeah. Man, so this is episode 1. And, I'm like just so grateful that we can have this conversation and that you're opening up. When I look at just the things we've covered in this episode, God has orchestrated this hard. You and I both believe that God is sovereign. Yep. He is 100% in control. And so as we continue with this podcast and these episodes and sharing these stories and these lessons, we can't miss that, right? Because so many people are bitter about what happens to them. And I think your story and all the things we're going to share moving forward are going to really lay that out for people to understand God is in control and his plans are way higher than ours. And you're in these kids' lives and there's more of this story to tell. Thank you, man.
I appreciate it. Thank you.